Tom Gilbert doesn't just know the history of environmental conservation, he's lived it. A leader in conservation for 65 years and key to creating and implementing the Man in the Biosphere program in the United States and around the world, Tom is a fount of first-hand knowledge about the MAB program and worldwide conservation. In July 2016, the Continental Divide Research Learning Center invited Tom to stay at McGraw Ranch, a historic ranch turned research center in Rocky Mountain National Park. While there, he shared his knowledge through 3 days of conversation with Ben Babowski, then acting superintendent of Rocky Mountain.
My beginning in the program, and that was the 1972 World Conference on National Parks, which was held in Grand Teton and Yellowstone. And that's when Michel Baptiste of UNESCO asked Director George Hartzog for assistance in the development of the MAB project on conservation of natural areas and of the genetic material contained. I was just delighted that I was selected. So I went to UNESCO, Paris, in 1973. My charge was to help organize the expert panels to develop the guidelines and criteria for the program. But before that, Baptiste asked me to develop a kind of master plan, how I saw going about this. And so, as naive as I was, I developed a plan over a few days and came back, and it, as I remember, was a plan for something like $5 or $6 million, but it was with not only UNESCO and what funding was needed, but cooperating agencies like IUCN and participating states. So it was a cooperative effort. One of the things that really helped to kick the program off. Before I went to Paris, I had worked for Russell Train, who had started this bilateral with the Soviet Union on environmental protection, and it had a section on protected areas. What's going to happen at this summit conference, which was proposed between the U.S. and the Soviet Union in Moscow in July of 1974? What is proposed on protection of the environment? And Herder said, we don't really have anything specific. So I said, how about supporting the MAB and Biosphere Reserve program? With Herder's help, we were able to get that proposal in, and it actually happened. The communique from Moscow went all over the world. It was featured in New York Times, and part of that was to support the MAB program. So that really was a big boost. And shortly, in the next few years, quite a few biosphere reserves were officially designated by UNESCO. And I was invited to become the national program coordinator for the MAB program. We had 14 different project areas at that time, but I felt biosphere reserves were the main focal area. So we set up a co-lead agency arrangement between the Park Service and the Forest Service, getting agencies to work together to solve common problems related to conservation and sustainable development, and come up with pilot projects in the U.S. So we proposed 4 pilot projects, one in the Southern Appalachians, which I was most familiar with, the Lake Champlain Basin, Rocky Mountain region, and the Lower Colorado River Basin. Those were the 4 what we labeled cooperative regional demonstration projects. 1979 memorandum to the agencies in support of the Man in Biosphere program gave the Departments of Interior and Agriculture the main responsibility for developing the domestic program in the U.S., and of course the State Department for the international program. We often complain about the resources and the funding that we have here in the United States, but compare that to many of the less developed countries. You know, the situation, the wars, the conflicts, the separation into different country, Eritrea, and all of the things that went on had to be taken into consideration. The biosphere reserves are, and many national parks, are in the best position to add a really important dimension to this whole new program of global citizen education. And if we don't succeed in doing that, I don't see how we're going to overcome these horrendous obstacles that we have to overcome now. One has to be optimistic. Raymond Dasman had written a book called Planet in Peril, Man and Biosphere Today, in which he described the situation. And he said that we need to not only understand the needs, but deal with the mechanisms to conserve natural resources and sustain the environment. So the knowledge and the technology is much better today. We probably know what needs to be done, but the difficulty is bridging that gap between what we know needs to be done and convincing the politicians that it should be done. I keep coming back to Frank Darling's statement at the beginning of the program in 1968. If our eyes are open wide enough worldwide. But he also said time is not on our side. And so I think we can't be content with business as usual. We've got to do something extraordinary. Put it this way, these reserves are one means of keeping our options open for the future and doing the best that we can to sustain the resources that we depend upon.